Hello everybody, it's Reddy here and welcome back to another one of my benchmarks. Today we're going to be taking a look at Prominence II Modpack from Minecraft. This is a RPG themed questing modpack with some magic, I believe, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in this modpack, different dimensions and everything. And it is quite an intensive modpack, so we're going to be taking a look at it here today, both in single player, and I'm going to do a test on multiplayer because there is an issue with the modpack, which we'll get into later on. And today, what I'm going to be testing basically is 16 chunks render distance all the way up to 32 chunks render distance. We're going to be testing the world generation. We'll test how it runs on single player, and then we'll test how it runs on my dedicated server, which I've got running right now. And I have got a potential fix for the problem with this modpack, both in single player and on the multiplayer side, but we'll get into that later on. I'm also going to be testing shaders a little bit here today as well, though the priority is not shaders today, it is the modpack. So we're primarily looking at the CPU performance and the RAM performance of the modpack, and also we're going to be testing 1080p, 1440p and 4K. So we're doing a lot of tests today, so I do want to kind of go through it fairly quick so that I don't bore you with each test. I don't want to take too long. I will quickly say that I've got the latest NVIDIA drivers for my RTX 3060 Ti, and we are using the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D. The game is also installed on a Gen 4 NVMe, which is pretty important for big mod packs like this. Have a fast storage device. A normal SSD should be fine though. And so with that, let's jump into the first settings that we're going to be trying here, and then let's jump into a single player world and start benchmarking. So these are the settings. Do not skip this part. If you skip this part and you're asking me questions about settings that I've already covered here, I won't be answering them in the comments, so do not skip this part. We're not trying shaders yet. We'll try that later on. I will leave timestamps in the description, and you'll see it on the video player. If you're watching it on desktop, basically you'll see the section, so you can just skip along to which parts you want to check. We're going to be playing at 16 chunks render distance to start with. I'm not going to be adjusting any other setting other than resolution, render distance, and also the shaders. That's all I'm going to be adjusting, and I'll tell you every single time when I adjust them. All the other settings, however, we're pretty much playing on fancy maximum settings. You can see here, I know my statistics rather blocks the left hand side, but I am playing with these settings. You can still see the settings and their actual turn, if they're turned on or not. But yeah, this is pretty much how the game comes. The only thing I've turned off is the fog. I just turned the fog off because I don't like to have the fog, though shaders will implement that itself when we turn shaders on. And the only other settings that I've turned off, which are purely optional and don't affect performance, is FOV effects and distortion effects. I don't like my camera changing FOV when I'm sprinting, essentially, so I turn those off too. But that's what we're going to be playing with, so let's jump into a single player and start benchmarking. Alright, and here we are, we're in the game, we're in single player, and as you can see, if I just go ahead and reset my FPS, we're playing at 16 chunks 1080p, and I've just gone ahead and checked. Look in the top right, I have allocated 16 gigs to the mod pack. I'm not sure what the mod pack comes with by itself, but I've given it 16 gigs RAM. Basically, I've allocated 16 gigs to it. Whether or not it needs more or less than that, I'm not 100% sure, but I've given it 16 gigs because I have 32 gigs in my system. If you are looking for the rest of the specs of my PC, it'll be in the description for you. If you've got any other questions about my PC or my setup, be sure to ask me and I'll try and get back to you when I can. But as you can see here, in this particular biome in the mod pack, I am getting around nearly 500 FPS. Yes, we are still CPU bound. You can see that the GPU usage is still not being fully utilized, but that's to be expected. That's just usually how Minecraft runs, even with a lot of mod packs. If you don't use shaders, you really don't need a very good GPU to play the game. You just need a lot of RAM for mod packs and a pretty decent CPU. But yeah, this is pretty easy to run here for this. And the world did take quite a bit longer than a regular world to generate. It took about, I'd say it took about a minute to generate the world for me to get in here and actually start playing, which is not exactly that long, but for me, I can generate Minecraft worlds like that with my setup, right? So it definitely takes quite a bit longer. But once you're in here, you can see like 500, 600 FPS. And I do want to quickly say that FPS in Minecraft is really, really hard to benchmark because literally, depending on where you're looking, you get different FPS. You can stand still and just look in different places and you'll get different FPS. The FPS fluctuates pretty heavily in Minecraft, and also this mod pack has a ton of different biomes, and the biome does also affect the FPS. I haven't put too much time into this mod pack. I've played it pretty much just multiplayer for about 10 hours with a friend a few months ago, so I'm not aware of all the dimensions and which one is the most demanding. But from the dimensions that my friend and I went to, we found that most, if not all of the dimensions are actually easier to run for our PCs than this overworld area is. But yeah, that's going to do for 1080p 16 chunks. I'm not going to spend too much time on it here. It runs buttery smooth. There's really no reason to spend any more time on this. So we're going to ramp it all the way up to 32 chunks straight away because we really don't have time to be going to 20, 24 chunks, yada yada, right? We'll just go straight up to 32. And yes, I didn't turn the simulation distance up or anything. you feel free to do that. I'm not going to do that here today. We're just going to be turning the render distance up to 32. And this is generating fairly quick, because when I first came in here, I actually told it to generate 32 chunks, and then I swapped it back down to 16 just to make sure the initial world would generate, so we're not waiting for it, because we are going to do a separate world generation test later on. So, but you can see here, if I just fly down and I play like normal, we're still getting around 350, 360, 370 FPS in this particular biome. So we'll try and travel somewhere a little bit, because I want to see if traveling somewhere is going to affect my performance too much. Yeah, we're still getting pretty crazy FPS. FPS definitely did drop a little bit in this area. I'm just trying to make sure that we do have the 32 chunks. It does seem like we have the 32 chunks, but yeah, this bamboo area is definitely way more intensive than just where we were there, but it's still completely fine. We're still pretty much at 250, 270, 300 FPS range. 1% lows are a little low, but that's to be expected. If you set an FPS cap, the game will become smoother essentially. Look how much RAM this mod pack is using. I'm using nearly 21 gigs of RAM already, and we've only been playing for a little bit. The mod pack itself is saying it's using around 6-7 gigs. I can absolutely guarantee you now, that little F3 screen there in the top right, that's not accurate. Usually Minecraft is using 1.5 times what it says there, or even 2 times that amount of RAM, in all honesty. So I don't completely trust that F3, you know, 7 gigs RAM usage. Usually it's quite a bit more than what it's actually saying there, in all honesty, from my testing at least, and from other people's testing too. But it's still more than playable. You can see that we're still CPU bound. We're not GPU bound here at all. We're going to test shaders. We're going to see what it runs like here with shaders real quick. We'll go back down to 16 chunks, and we're going to turn shaders on. Now, this mod pack ships with complementary reimagined Euphoria patches, so that's the one that we're going to be using. We're not going to be trying any other shaders here today. Feel free to check other videos for shaders. There's so many videos out there on shaders. There's not a whole ton of reason to test shaders usually with a lot of mod packs and stuff, because the results are going to be very similar, since the shader itself is the limiting factor usually. But some mod packs do add a lot of visuals as well, which can reduce performance with the shaders on top. So it looks like here at 1080p we are now GPU bound, as to be expected, at 16 chunks, and we're getting around 90, 130 FPS in this particular biome. And I do want to be clear, this mod pack does allow you to build big machinery. There is machinery in this mod pack. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but there is machinery. There is automatic systems that you can build. You can build big factories and stuff. So bear in mind, once you start building all that stuff, if you choose to do that, that's going to probably tank your FPS quite a bit, having those sorts of big, massive factories and stuff. But that's completely optional, because the way that you play the mod pack is completely up to you. You don't have to do that stuff. For example, my friend and I, we just simply did a lot of questing and went into a load of different realms and just basically did a bunch of questing. We didn't bother with the automatic stuff. We wanted to play it for the RPG kind of element, not for the factory building stuff. So you don't necessarily have to play like that, but just do bear in mind, if you do choose to build massive automatic stuff, it's going to be way more CPU intensive. So I'm going to say this is pretty solid. This is pretty fine. 100, 110 FPS. It's not exactly the highest FPS. It's not too reassuring for the higher resolutions coming up here, because yeah, this is not a lot of FPS for 1080p with shaders, let's put it that way. But we'll try out 32 chunks with it, because I know some people are going to want to see that. So let me just reset my FPS real quick. And yeah, the FPS is pretty similar from 16 chunks to 32. Yeah, I can definitely tell that my frame time graph is a little bit worse. We've lost about, I'd say, a quarter of our FPS roughly. We're now at about 90 frames at 32 chunks, but it's not like it's that bad of a loss, because we have doubled our render distance, but we only lost about a quarter of our FPS. So in terms of how much extra vision we have for the tiny amount of performance we lost, I still think it's fine. So yeah, if you want to play at 32 chunks with shaders with this mod pack with the 3060 Ti, it's pretty much possible. You're just not going to be hitting that 100 FPS range most likely in a lot of biomes. Now I'm sure in some biomes you'll still hit above 100 FPS, but where I am right now, at least, it's not hitting that 100 frames, so just do bear that in mind. So yeah, we're going to test 1440p now. We're just going to go straight to it. I'm not going to waste your guys' time too much. So let me just turn the shaders off. There we go. And we're going to go down to that, and we're going to apply. Right, so this is 1440p, fancy settings at 16 chunks render distance, clearly no shaders. I don't think I need to point out that we're not using shaders. You can see we're still getting pretty much the same FPS as 1080p, and that's simply because we're at a CPU limitation again, and we're not GPU bound. So anytime we're not GPU bound, we should see very similar, if not the exact same FPS as 1080p. So yeah, we're getting around 450 FPS where I am right now at 16 chunks, and in all honesty, with a PC like this, you could play it higher than 16 chunks, obviously. So we're not going to spend too much more time here with 16 chunks render distance at 1440p. We will go ahead and up that, and I do need to up my UI as well because it's not too seeable. So there we go. I've ramped it up to 32 chunks, and I haven't been over here yet, so this hasn't rendered in, of course. It needs time to actually render in. And this is one of the problems with this mod pack, is world generation. It's absolutely abysmal. I don't know if this mod pack has any world generation mods installed. I would have to imagine it does, but this is the worst world generation I've seen in a mod pack or in Minecraft in recent time. For whatever reason, this mod pack has significantly worse world generation than a lot of mod packs. I have a solution for this later on, which I'll get into later on once I get to the world generation tests. 32 chunks render distance, pretty similar FPS to 1080p. It is a little bit lower, but I have a sneaking suspicion it's because we're in a more intensive biome. You can see we've got a whole bamboo section there, and we got a really thick forest biome with more bamboo over there. Bamboo seems to be quite intensive for whatever reason. It's still CPU bound, we're still completely CPU bound, and we're getting high FPS. You can see we're still at around 250 range, so I'm pretty happy with this. 1% lows are always going to be abysmal in these kinds of mod packs with Minecraft if you set your FPS to unlimited. We're going to go straight to shaders because this is still completely fine. We're still CPU bound, so we'll set this to 16 chunks again, and we'll turn the shaders back on. Give it a sec. There we go, we've got shaders on, 16 chunks. 1440p. So how's this gonna run? Okay, I was gonna say it's very similar to 1080p, but that's not true. 1080p was getting around 120 frames, whereas 1440p we've gone down to about 100. So we have lost around 20 frames, which in all honesty is not that terrible. I don't think that the performance losses usually in a lot of games, especially in Minecraft, going from 1080p up to 1440p, it's not really that much of a performance loss usually, but the visuals significantly improve. So yeah, if you're still playing at 1080p and you're thinking about switching over to 1440, let me tell you right now, it's absolutely worth it. It's not that much more intensive for games like Minecraft and most games to go from 1080 to 1440. With this mod pack, with the shaders, with 16 chunks, we're still getting around 100 frames, and the averages is about 90. We did see that I got around 80 when I looked in a different location, but still more than playable for a mod pack like this. You know, it's not a super competitive PvP game mode, so we don't need the hundreds and hundreds of FPS that you might want in a competitive PvP game mode. So yeah, I'm gonna say this is a-okay. But will 32 chunks be okay? That is the question. Let's get to 32 chunks. 32 chunks. I'm staying in the same areas because I want to make sure the 32 chunks are here. This isn't about world generation tests. This is just about playing around because we're going to do that world generation test later, and I will have a potential fix for the world generation issues that we're gonna get in this mod pack later on. Going up to 32 chunks has tanked our FPS quite a bit more. We're now about just hitting 60, actually dropping to the 50s sometimes. Quite a drop from the 90 FPS range that we were at on average previously. And even over here, like 50 something frames, but you know, it's almost playable. If you were to set your render distance to maybe like 24, 26, then it would absolutely be over 60 FPS all the time, and you could play like this. For 32 chunks, I'm gonna say it's not playable. No, like we're getting 40s right here looking at this place, and I'm getting like 30s sometimes. So I'm going to say that 32 chunks 1440p with shaders, not really possible, unfortunately, but that's okay. And we're gonna now switch over to 4K resolution. So there we go, 4K resolution, 16 chunks. Are we going to be GPU bound in this scenario, or are we still going to be CPU bound at 4K? And the answer to that question seems like we will still be CPU bound. So 4K resolution, exact same FPS pretty much as 1080p. Now the FPS is slightly lower, but we are in a more intensive biome. Like I said previously, it's going to fluctuate pretty heavily depending on the biome that you're in, but we're not GPU bound still at 4K 16 chunks without shaders. So we'll switch it straight over to 32 chunks because really no point. We're getting the exact same FPS as 1080p, so might as well switch it over. FPS, we are actually pretty close to being GPU bound, if not actually GPU bound. So it's definitely a lot more intensive than like vanilla Minecraft to run this mod pack for sure, which I'm not surprised. It's a lot more graphically intensive, and I believe it's got a lot of like resource packs to load up like custom textures and stuff for this. We'll actually take a look at that. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, it's got a lot of like custom resource packs, which is absolutely what's destroying FPS as well when it comes to the GPU performance. But it's pretty comparable FPS to 1080p. I do believe it is slightly lower, but most of the time we're still CPU bound. It looks like we're pretty much still CPU bound all the time. Though Minecraft does work in a funky way sometimes, like when the GPU usage is at like 91% usage to 94% usage, it's actually GPU bound in a lot of cases in Minecraft. It just doesn't go up to 100% in the UI or 99% in the UI. Very bizarre. I'm not 100% sure as to why that is. It's just one of those things that certain games it just happens in certain games, but it is still GPU bound. And Minecraft is one of those in certain situations. Most likely still CPU bound. Anyways, 4K, still more than playable. Almost GPU bound, if not just GPU bound in certain situations, depending on where I'm looking here. But it's still completely fine. We're still way above 100 FPS. So I'm going to say this is totally fine for 4K. So we'll go ahead and we'll turn on shaders now at 4K. And we'll see how this does. This is probably where my FPS is not going to be too good. And you can see there, look, the GPU usage is maxed out, even though it's saying it's at 96%. It is maxed out. It's just one of those things, like I said, with Minecraft. But we're still just above 60 frames. It does drop a little bit. It does drop into the 50s here. This beach, for whatever reason, is like super intensive. I really don't know why. I don't know what's so intensive about the beaches. But for the most part, we're around that 60 FPS range, just below it actually. It's almost completely playable, but we'll lower the render distance down a little bit. First time we're actually going to try a lower render because of the fact that it's not above 60 a lot of the time. So we're going to see if we can just get above 60. So we're now at 12 chunks, which is not ideal for shaders, especially if you're going to play at 4K. I don't think you're going to want to play at such a tiny render distance, right? But then again, if you're playing 4K, you probably don't have the 3060 Ti. Unless you only play games like Minecraft, which you can get away with it then, I guess. But yeah, going to 12 chunks definitely helped a little bit. Our FPS is a little bit higher than 60, if not just at 60 at 12 chunks 4K with shaders. So not awful. But you can see here, the longer I'm playing, the more my RAM usage is creeping up. We're now at 24 gigs RAM usage, which is quite a bit higher than what we were at. Originally we're up to like 8 gigs, nearly 9 gigs RAM usage up there, but it's definitely using more than that. It is slowly creeping up in RAM usage as we play here. Yeah, that's gonna do it for the 4K at 12 chunks. We're going to now test the world generation. This is what a lot of you have probably been waiting for. So we're going to test the world gen, because this is the problem with the mod pack, and I think I might have a solution for you. So the way that I like to test the world generation, if you've ever seen one of my videos, you know what's coming. It's the elytra, because the elytra in Minecraft is something that most people are going to use to fly around. Now, the mod pack might have better ways of flying, or better ways of traveling, or faster ways of traveling. You know, there might be teleport things in this mod pack where you can just TP around. I'm not 100% sure. We're just going to use the old-fashioned elytra. And I haven't pressed F8. It's just something that happens with this mod pack. I don't know how to turn this off. It goes into this smooth, like, action camera, which I can't control. Like, at least I don't know where the option is. But we're just gonna be flying. Look at the world gen. This is pretty bad world gen, and I'm not going particularly fast right now. This is how the world generates in this mod pack once you start traveling quick. So if you get an elytra in this mod pack, or you get any sort of decent way of traveling with this mod pack, you're gonna run into these issues when you start exploring the map. You're basically gonna have a lot of world generation issues if you find a way to travel fast, basically, for the first time. Now, do note, if you're not too familiar with Minecraft, once you've traveled through here, the next time you come through this area, let's say you build a minecart system through this area, as if anybody still uses minecarts, but let's say, for example, you built something like a minecart, or you just walked through this area again, it'll load much better next time, because essentially what I'm doing right now is generating the world, so it's very intensive on the CPU. It's very intensive to do this, but when you come back here, it's just loading these chunks back up because you've already generated them, right? I hope I didn't confuse you there with that. But the first time you ever travel through an area, sorry, it has to generate the world. So that's why the performance is like this for the world gen. It's pretty bad. This is one of the worst world generations I've ever seen, actually. It can't really keep up with an elytra that well. You can see it's pretty abysmal, and it's not using much of my CPU at all. It's pretty much barely touching my CPU usage, so it's not optimized at all, which is why I think that there's no optimization mods for the world, which is kind of weird, considering we are on a highly modded mod pack, so I don't understand why they wouldn't have world generation optimization mods installed. There must be some sort of conflict between the custom world generation, because obviously they've got a lot of different biomes, they've got a lot of different world generation compared to vanilla Minecraft, so there must be some sort of conflict between world generation optimization mods with the other world generation mods, because yeah, you can see here, even at 16 chunks, it's just not able to do it. It's not able to really generate that well. Don't get me wrong, it's generated now, but you can see how terrible the world generation is. And if you play at 32 chunks, it's even worse. So if you have a much weaker CPU, you're going to have even worse world generation, because it's just not utilizing your CPU very well. You can see like just how bad this is. I just wanted to do it again just to emphasize just how bad this is. Look at my RAM usage, by the way. It's gone up to nearly 28 gigs here. It's pretty insane. But it's pretty bad world gen, is what I'm trying to say. So we're going to jump onto my dedicated server, because I believe there is a plugin / mod which should help with this. I don't have the mod installed here on my single player, but I do have it on my server, and I'm sure many of you are already aware of what I'm talking about. But I'll see you on my server. I'm going to jump on it now. I've got it running, and I've had the mod, well, plugin running. So we'll jump on over and we'll take a look if it actually does help. So now I'm connected to my own server, which is running on my dedicated PC, which is my old gaming PC. And the specs for this server are an Intel Core i7-4790K, which is a 10-year-old CPU, so not the newest hardware. I've also got 16 gigs of DDR3 1600 MHz RAM installed, which, by the way, again, not the newest or the greatest hardware. It's literally just used as a server PC for me and my friends. I've dedicated 8 gigs of the RAM, I believe, to Minecraft, or to the server essentially, which I'm not sure if is enough, but when my friend and I played around a year ago on this mod pack, it seemed to run totally fine. And what I've done with the server for optimizations here, which is what we're going to be testing, is I installed the Chunky plugin, and I ran Chunky while I was doing that those tests in single player. So Chunky wasn't running for very long, so I'm not sure exactly how far out the world generated using Chunky. And for those of you that are not too familiar with Chunky, I'll give you a little rundown on it. It's basically a plugin / mod, so you can put it onto servers, and you can also put it into single player as a mod. And what you can tell it to do is using the commands. I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do it all, because you can check plugin, you can check Chunky guides and just check Chunky out itself, but you can essentially tell it to pre-generate the world to a certain radius of your choosing. And what I did is I came on the server and I told it to generate 5,000 chunks in a radius, so it'll generate 5,000 chunks out in a radius, but it hasn't generated that far out because I haven't given it long enough, obviously. So yeah, I'm connected to it now, and I'm going to be able to tell you my server stats here as I'm playing, just in case there's any massive hiccups and stuff, because I have got my server statistics on my other monitor right where you are. So I will be able to tell you if it's having some serious issues. We're going to see how much of an impact does Chunky have when it comes to actually flying and traveling. We're going to get an Elytra, and we're going to get fireworks. So we're going to put the Elytra on, and we're just going to travel with the fireworks. Now, I can already tell you that the game feels a lot smoother being connected to a server, but just because your own PC is not doing all the calculations essentially for the game, you're simply just connected to it. So it's a lot easier to run essentially. So I'm not sure exactly how far Chunky managed to generate out, but you can already see, look at the world gen. Sorry, I don't know how to fly in this mod pack. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll go into F3. This doesn't help, does it? I'm sorry, but you can clearly see that the world generation is way smoother. Now, I actually think I might have already hit the border of Chunky, because I did not let it run for very long, and Chunky did not generate very quick on this mod pack. I'm going to try and stick to the borders of Chunky where it generated, but you can see, I just want to emphasize how good the world generation is, and my server PC is only utilizing around 30% of the CPU. It's using around nearly 7.5 gigs of RAM right now on the server. But the thing that I want you to pay attention to is how fast the world is generating, because I haven't been here, and it's not technically generating because Chunky's already pre-generated it. We're just loading up what Chunky loaded, or what Chunky generated for us essentially. But I think for this mod pack, you're going to want to get Chunky installed, absolutely, and you're going to want to let Chunky pre-generate the world for you, because once you start traveling fast with an Elytra or any other traveling method, maybe a jetpack or something if it's in this mod pack, I'm really not sure, Chunky is going to help significantly because you're no longer going to have to generate the chunks as you travel. You're just loading them up because they've already been generated by Chunky. It's especially useful on servers when you're playing with friends, because if you've got multiple people traveling in multiple different areas, it's very intensive, right? And we've already seen how terrible this mod pack is for world generation. I'm getting some really weird lighting glitch right now. I don't know why. I think there's like a thunderstorm or something. Don't pay too much attention to it, but I haven't traveled here before. And so this is all what Chunky's pre-generated for me. And the reason why this is so impressive is because it's being done by a 10-year-old CPU. This is not being generated by the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D. This is being loaded up and generated by a 10-year-old i7 4790K. And so that's why it's so impressive, is because Chunky has literally made a huge difference. It allows a 10-year-old CPU to be able to load the chunks up completely fine because it's being pre-generated by Chunky. We're not generating the chunks, right? And so that's all I wanted to point out with the dedicated server. In terms of performance, you're definitely going to have smoother gameplay. Look at my frame time graph. It's a lot smoother than what it was previously. And I am playing, by the way, because I never mentioned it, but on the server I'm playing at 1440p with 16 chunks, all fancy settings. But it's a much smoother experience playing on a server. But whether you play on a server or you play single player, just install Chunky and tell it to generate as far out as you want. Just do bear in mind that the further out that you tell it to generate, the longer it will take, and also the bigger your file size for your world will be. So just do bear that in mind. But yeah, like I said, I think the trade-off is absolutely worth it because it makes it so that you can actually travel in the game where you otherwise wouldn't be able to travel because it simply doesn't generate the chunks quick enough. And if you're wondering why I didn't actually test Chunky with my Ryzen 7 7800X 3D inside of single player, it's because Chunky does take a little bit of time to generate the chunks, and so I let Chunky generate the chunks on my server while I was doing the video in single player, basically. So I didn't want to be waiting around for Chunky for this video, but you can see it does make a huge difference. If a 10-year-old CPU can do this, and I couldn't do this with my brand new CPU, you know, from 2023, then you can clearly see it makes quite an impact, or it makes quite a difference having Chunky installed. But that's going to do it for today's video. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing. Hopefully the information was quite clear. I tried to make this really quick and, you know, really snappy. Do let me know what you thought of the video. Got any questions, do let me know in the comments, and I'll try and get back to you when I can. But until next time, take care of yourselves, and goodbye for now.